this third, the third episode in this four-part series, Decriminalizing the Black Body. I'm your host, Paulette Payne. In case you're joining me for the first time and unsure the premise behind this series, I want you to know the purpose is to create needed dialogue about systemic racism in America and the steps that we must take in order to guarantee the rights, liberty, and justice for Black people. We have heard from scholars, activists, and concerned citizens whose mission it is to do the same. The conversations have been profound, and tonight's won't be any different. So please take an opportunity to pose questions to the guests. You can include those questions in the thread of this broadcast. Please share this with your network. These are hard conversations for many, but they have to be had. Because in order to create change and to affect change in our society as it relates to the humanity of Black people and the treatment of our bodies, we have to have these hard conversations. All right, so now, part 3, from the perspective of privilege. I'm joined by Alexa Ann Sturdevant, who is an educator and ally, Bryce, who is an attorney and musician. Chad Russell is a DJ and musician. Eve Paul is the operations manager, and Paul Reeve is the Simmons Professor of Mormon Studies at the University of Utah. All right, so we're going to just go on and get right into this conversation. But before I start, I just want to thank you all for saying yes to this invitation. Not everybody said yes, and that's okay. It's not a problem, but I appreciate your willingness to lend your voice to this conversation. So I've seen some of your posts in support of Black lives and the systemic racism that has led to thousands of Black people over a span of 401 years, the murder of Black people over the span of 401 years. How have those posts been received by your network? So how are people in your circle receiving your advocacy on the behalf of Black people? Bret, I'd like to start with you.
Thanks, Paulette. So just a little background on myself. I'm from the South, from Knoxville, Tennessee, just up the road from you in Atlanta. And I have a lot of friends from the South and a lot of friends from Utah because I've spent a lot of time living out there as well. And I was in a band called Jericho Road for the last 20-something years as well. So lots of interactions with people on social media about a lot of things. And I've just tried to give a voice of compassion and to not fall into the divide and conquer scheme that some people have for our country. And I think that from everyone I've talked to, I've got a lot of people who have appreciated me speaking up. They've asked some questions about, well, does this mean this implication or this inference? And I've tried to be fair-minded in that, but I haven't had anybody really push back. I did have one person that had been a friend for a few days that I had to block. That was just became really abusive in direct messaging. Was trying to bully me into taking my post down, and I just told her I don't have time for this type of stuff and blocked her. So, but besides that, I haven't really had any negative consequences. I think most people agree that I haven't heard anyone that doesn't agree that what happened to George Floyd was a tragedy. And I think a lot of conversations are being started now, including your series that I think are very important for people to understand each other. Stephen R. Covey, in his 7 habits, I think one of the habits was seek first to understand and then to be understood. And I think the more that people who don't know each other attempt to do that, the more progress that can be made.
Thank you for that. Paul, what about you? What's been the reception?
Yeah, well, a couple of things have come to mind. The reception that I've received has generally been favorable. My oldest son, on the other hand, not so much. He's been speaking out quite a bit. And he has recently returned from a mission for his faith. And it was really, other people of his age, the 20-year-old age range, where they're denying that systematic racism exists, outright reject that. The narrative of the mainstream media is all shaping this for its own purposes. That was some of the feedback that he has received, and trying to help him through that. Him sort of sending me texts from different people who are engaging with him, and trying to educate. But the frustrating thing has been it turns personal pretty quickly when they don't like the message. They come after the messenger, attacking his faith. Somehow his faith isn't viable because he's advocating for Black Lives Matter. Those are the types of things that I've seen my children experience. He's also getting support, right? So I don't want to characterize it as only one kind of message, but really surprising, well, not really surprising, I guess, at the way that some of those have played out amongst some of the people that he encountered in his mission experience. Then the other comment, 4 years ago, when the nation was going through, a similar kind of, not to this degree, but similar kind of upheaval over the death of, once again, Black people at the hands of police. I wrote an op-ed for a Salt Lake-based newspaper, and that op-ed was aimed at white people to try to help them stand in a place of empathy. It was trying to get white people to say, hey, can we see experiences from our own historical past that allow us to stand in a place of empathy, so that our automatic knee-jerk response to Black Lives Matter isn't all lives matter. You have to understand how offensive that is. If your life is under attack, then of course all lives matter, but your life is under attack right now, and your life is the life that needs support from those who are around us. I received hate mail, people who went to the trouble of looking up my email address at the university where I work. And one of them, to my department chair, my associate chair, and the dean of my college, insisting that I be fired. And that has been reposted by a variety of people in 2020. They remembered it and have gone back to it and reposted it. And I think maybe the reception has been better this time around because, for whatever reason, maybe it's just the horrific nature of George Floyd's death. It may be softening some of those hearts. I'm not quite sure what to make of it, but my sense is that maybe the fact that it's caught on tape the way that it was and its horrific nature has maybe changed some perspectives, and a variety of people are reposting that op-ed from 4 years ago. So for the most part, my social media feed has been positive, and that's maybe a reflection of the kind of friends that I have on social media, but my children haven't experienced the same thing.
And you bring up something, a very good point, and we'll circle back to it. But this whole notion of Christianity, I've seen several times. In fact, my sister had someone that she was formerly connected with, and as of 2 or 3 days ago, the young lady blocked her because my sister refused to engage in confrontational conversation with her about this whole thing, because ultimately the young girl wasn't willing to talk and understand. And that's the first step when it comes to white people wanting to have this conversation and to understand. You have to have the desire. But anyway, the girl brought in Christianity. Well, Jesus he wasn't a violent man, and this, that, and the third. But the reality is Christ loved all people. He was no respecter of any person, and another responder said, well, and she was talking about the protests, and a young man followed that comment and said, well, Jesus turned tables in the temple because people were selling goods, in the temple. So Christ was certainly a man of compassion, but he was also a man of justice. And so we've got to be very careful when we bring in Christianity as it relates to Black people getting the justice that all people have in this country. But unfortunately, we have not over the last 401 years. But I want to carry on this conversation about what your networks are, how they're responding to your outcry, if you will, and your advocacy for Black people. Chad, let me hear from you.
Well, I've got a pretty diverse following, and my local following up in around the Chattanooga area, and I've got a lot of friends throughout the Southeast. My whole aim, and I will do it kind of as a shock and awe, if you will, just to be engaging, to get the conversation started. And it has been a lot more difficult in the past with Trayvon Martin and with Michael Brown. As engaging as those conversations were, it's nothing like what I've seen over the last week and a half. And so when I post something, or I've also gone a step further within the last week, and when I've seen posts and seen comments, I've tried to be engaging also in response. And my whole aim is to just get people to understand, get the conversation going, and keep it going. And it's been tough. It's been really tough. And as sensitive as this issue is, I've not heard anybody really scratch on this, but I think with the current state of affairs with the pandemic and with the lockdowns, I think that has kind of been a good thing and a bad thing. I think it's added a fuel to the fire, if you will, where people are a lot more aggressive in their opinions, or at least that's what I've noticed. Because there again, I've got a lot of diversity on my page. I sell real estate as well as here in Chattanooga and North Georgia, as well as do the whole DJ and music thing. So I've kind of got a lot of split things going on there, a lot of different personalities. So when I post something, I've tried to be pretty lame, pretty watered down up until the last couple of weeks. And because it's to the point where you just can't ignore it anymore. And so I've had a lot more heated discussions, as Paul said, with direct messages and private messages, people coming back at me that way because they're either afraid to say something publicly that they would say to me privately or what have you. As far as my kids are concerned, one of my daughters has gotten a little bit of flack and feedback on her Snapchat. but not anything bad. Not anything bad. I think because of the way that I've tried to raise both daughters, we're not doing it in a negative connotation. We're not doing it to bash somebody over the head. We're trying to be engaging, and we're trying to educate, and we're trying to give people the forum to understand the whole dialogue and the whole conversation. One of the biggest things that I'll try to do is ask, one thing that keeps coming up. I don't know if you other guys have the same kind of thing. There's always that. The way George Floyd was murdered. Yes, he was murdered. There's no question about it. There's always that but, and that when you hear that but, that's what destroys that individual's entire argument. And then what I will do, instead of getting angry or mad, I just increase the dialogue. Because then the next thing, well, it was but the looting, but the rioting, and I don't support those things. However, I do understand those things. So I will ask, okay, well, and there again, being friends with a lot of the people that I've been friends with, I'm not one generally. Now I have unfriended a few, and I've asked some to unfriend me if they don't like my viewpoints. But when it gets to that, but the rioting, but the looting, I ask them, okay, well, you are the same person that posted 2 years ago, 3 years ago, the whole Colin Kaepernick taking the knee, the NFL players taking the knee. Okay, well, you got offended when players took a knee for this very same issue, for police brutality specifically. What is it that you would have them do? What is it that you would do? What is it that is respectable? What is it that would be effective to address these kinds of issues? And then most people so far have been dumbfounded. It pulls the stinger out. They're left without a comeback because they're having to think, well, wait a minute. Okay. So that's my whole aim in the post themselves, is to continue to engage in a dialogue that normally under any other circumstance couldn't or wouldn't be had.
Chad, you brought up something very important. Anytime you use but, that negates everything. And so when but is associated with the murder of Black people at the hands of law enforcement, that amplifies why all lives don't matter. All lives do not matter, because if they did, when we're talking about the murder of Black people at the hands of law enforcement, you would then understand that, yeah, Black lives matter, all lives matter. So thank you for bringing that point up. Eve, talk to us a little bit about how the reception of your advocacy is being received by your network.
All right. Thank you, Chad. First, I'm inspired by your viewpoint because it's very different than mine. And I like to hear the thinking behind it. Thank you. So let's say, and all of you, thank you for your points. First, I think it's important to understand that a little bit about my audience, and I'm speaking mostly on a personal Facebook page. You know, I have traditionally I post a lot of science articles. I get teased by family that, you know, I'm a science advocate or something, you know, and nobody's going to listen because I'm just posting science articles. And I have about 1,000 followers, so it's not a big audience. And I'm fine with that. I like to have the feeling of intimacy in my audience so that my way I think when I post that isn't science articles or jokes or memes, I try to post just as honestly and straight up as I can. And that's my come from. And I think on my jokes and my memes, I get responses very quickly. You know, I get a lot of responses really quickly, you know, happy faces. And I think on my science posts, I get a few and they're usually quick. When it's A personal post and I include family or pictures, it's very quick. When I'm speaking about Black Lives Matter or anything of a controversial nature, I always put it out there and wait by the phone and look for the notifications, and they don't come. And I wait and I think, maybe I'm posting this for the wrong reasons. Maybe I was doing it for myself, and then I start to doubt myself and think, okay, no, that's not it. And then I'll get a like or a hate or whatever. I'll get a reaction. And then I'll get another reaction. And it usually takes days for me to build up people that react to it. And they comment much more slowly. They take their time, they think about it, and they comment. And I find that it's challenging. It's just a challenging way to interact with people. It's not spur of the moment. I wish that Chad's skills, I wish I already had some of those so that I could just get people to engage. Mm-hmm. But when they do engage, I find that I have a small core who are very interested in the topic, and they'll ask a sincere question, or they'll state it sincerely what they think, and they step up and say even sometimes controversial things. But it is slow, and I don't know. That's the reaction to my stuff. I would say the reason I think it's slow is probably the same reason I would be slow if they had posted what I posted. And Colette asked me earlier, and we were talking, and I wanted to apologize to her because this topic is fearful for me. I don't ever want to be the face of white privilege. It's a shameful thing to be. Yet in my crew and on my Facebook page, that's kind of my goal. Let people see what I am. Let them know what I am and talk about it. How am I going to be anything but that if I don't own it and step out? Mm-hmm. So it's scary. I don't want to be a meme, I don't want to be those kind of things. And I certainly don't want that for my family, the people. So there's this shame associated with speaking out. And, I use the term with Paulette, white fright. There's this hesitancy to say something because we're going to say it wrong. And I have that in spades because I do say it wrong. And that's the whole point. I have to say it so that I can hear the other sides and the other points and come up with something that isn't wrong anymore. And if we don't own that we're wrong, how are we going to change racism? So that's the reaction I think other people have when they see my posts is they go, I'm not even sure how to react to this. How do I say this in a public way? How do I engage? And it's slow. And sometimes they come back and they engage. It's more slow.
And I don't mean to interrupt, but it's burning inside for me to say this.
That's it. That's all I was done.
Fear is a good place to be because that means that there's something, there's some level of truth that needs to come through the crevices. Fahamu, he was one of my guests on Thursday night. I think it was Thursday. And he said, it's okay to be scared because courage is birthed there. And you can carry that truth on the wings of courage. And that's what it's going to take to change the course of our current state of affairs. And it's not going to take Black people to do it because, we're the brunt of it. It's going to take people like you, each of you, speaking truth, eradicating fear, and doing it over and over and over again. Alexa, so you, and I don't mean to bring ageism into this conversation, but you're the youngest of the group. And Paul was talking about the flack that his son has been getting about advocacy around Black Lives Matter. First and foremost, how is your network receiving your advocacy? And then what flack are you getting from them, if any?
Yes, so I actually also served a mission for our church, and that's been one source of kind of mixed responses. Another missionary that I served with, he and I were both commenting on a mutual friend that Paulette, and my response to her post simply said, amen, I love you, I'm here to support you, and he kind of went on the combative and said, but you're not accounting for if lost lives are happening in the protest and riot, whatever. And he said that he was being hated on for, and I said, who is hating on you? Like, advocating for Black Lives Matter doesn't hate on anybody. It's, trying to further Black lives. And he said, I was called a white privilege boy. And I said, you are a white privilege boy, and I'm a white privilege girl. And that is just facts, because we don't have to we're not like held back, maybe because of other things, but not because of our skin. And that's just a fact. And he said he didn't believe in white privilege, and so I moved on. But so I was like, there's that reaction. I've gotten some family that have unfortunately blocked me. I got a text from someone in my family who I was really close to at one point in my life, and as I've kind of grown into my ideas of things, and they clearly do not line up with her ideas of things. She let me know that she blocked me, and she said, I don't want to change who you are and your passion, but whatever. And I was like, okay. I wanted to say, I do want to change your ideas about this specific issue, but that's fine. So there's been that, but then also I've gotten a lot of really positive things, because typically I'm one to, I don't know a lot about a lot of things. I don't know a ton about politics or, specific issues. And so I do kind of hold back on those kind of things because I don't want to talk out of ignorance. But this to me felt, you don't need an education to know right from wrong and morality versus immorality. And that to me, I had to start speaking. And so this was a pretty vast change for me and my feed. I keep it light. I share jokes and quotes of the day that are funny and whatever. And so I've gotten, luckily, a lot of positive things. And, I'm proud of how you've been posting. I'm proud of you for standing up for the underdog, which is what I've always tried to do in my life. But I had another family member, same branch of family, but he actually reached out to me over text last night and said that he's just proud of me to be standing up in spite of our kind of typically, you can be conservative and not anyway, but knowing that I kind of had received some backlash, he said that he was proud that I was standing up, and he went to a protest on Friday because he said he kind of felt inspired by my speaking out, and so that was really neat to see. And so, it's been a range of things, but that's just kind of where it's at, and I'm hoping to be able to be an advocate as where I can. So,
and you said something that struck a chord with me, and I want to be very clear. You mentioned you can still be conservative, but I want to be very clear. The treatment of Black people in America is not a bipartisan or partisan issue. It boils down to humanity. You see me as a person, I see you as a person, I value your life, you value my life, point blank, period. No more discussion. I need to have equal access. You need to have equal access. It needs to be equal and equitable so that at the end of the day, justice can be enjoyed by both parties. And that does not exist. So we can eliminate the conversation about Christianity. We can eliminate the conversation about Republican and Democrat, because when it boils down to it, it's about the humanity of people, of Black people, of white people. But for the purpose of this conversation, the humanity of Black people. Bret, you are the law in this conversation. As we all know, Chauvin, and I can't really pronounce his name correctly, but he was charged, thankfully, for the murder of George Floyd. And initially, it was a second-degree murder charge. Now it's I'm sorry, if it was first, third degree, now it's second degree. What's the likelihood, in your professional opinion, that those charges will stick? They will be firm. These he and of course the other officers will be indicted and serve the full extent of their time. What's the likelihood, in your opinion, that that will happen?
Well, that's a very interesting question, and it's just to be fair, I've been watching the news pretty much nonstop since coronavirus hit. Pretty much all day, every day, watching all the data, all the prognosticators, all the scientists. And with the George Floyd situation the past couple of weeks, I've watched a lot of commentary on this, and there's been a lot of different opinions. Not opinions on whether he should have been charged, but what charges should have been brought. Because you have to understand, I practiced criminal law for 2 years out in Utah, just to give you some reference. And I did 4 trials within those 2 years, one of which I defended an African-American man in an aggravated assault trial. And maybe we can talk about that later if you want. It's important to understand a few different things about the criminal justice system and how it works between prosecutors, defense attorneys, judges, juries, public perception, public pressure, that sort of thing. And I have to tell you, you number one, you don't necessarily want to overcharge somebody. Some prosecutors charge as high as they possibly can justify, with the intent of pleading it down to a different degree. So if somebody, Rudy Giuliani said, oh, he should have been charged with first-degree murder so that if he wanted to take a plea, he could plead a second. And then, because if you're doing third degree and there's a problem, some kind of problem with the case, he's pleading down to something like manslaughter. And Rudy Giuliani was a prosecutor for a long time, and he said, I thought he should have been charged with first-degree murder, which requires premeditation, requires a significant level of intent. When they initially charged him with third-degree murder, which it didn't have an intent aspect. It had, and I have to clarify, I'm not licensed in Minnesota, so I don't know the ins and outs of Minnesota law. Every state's different. I'm licensed in Tennessee and Utah, but there's, in general, all the states mostly follow similar aspects of law, but Tennessee and Utah don't have a third-degree murder. Minnesota does, which means that Chauvin's actions were so reckless that even if he was trying to just make George pass out, which is what I've read some different articles on, that technique that police have used, and some have said some police try to use that to try to make someone who's not cooperating become unconscious, so then they can put them in an ambulance or whatever. And even if Chauvin used that as a defense, he was being so reckless that he caused the death of George Floyd by using a reckless technique. And many of the articles that I read said that nowhere in 2020 is that technique taught to any police department in the United States. It's too dangerous. It caused the death of a white man in Dallas last year that was reported on CNN. And it's just too dangerous. It should not be being used in police departments today. So that's where the third-degree charges came from. Second degree, like I said, I don't know Minnesota law, but I think they had to increase the charges to second degree to charge the other 3 officers with accessory to a second-degree murder, which makes their charges also a felony. And that's a decision that was made by Keith Ellison, who's the Black Attorney General of Minnesota, who's taking over the prosecution now. Should also be noted that the police captain for Minneapolis is also African American. So I think they've all been working in conjunction on what level of charges can we justify. And I think that these police officers are all in a very bad position. Even if you don't get convicted criminal charges change your life. From my clients, many of my clients had their lives significantly changed. Some of them were innocent. I never represent any police officers, but some of my clients were innocent, and it was a lot of pressure on me because their life had been changed just by having charges brought against them. It's very expensive to defend. You have a lot of stress. Looking at spending the rest of your life in jail, it's a very big deterrent to have charges brought against somebody. And I do think that Chauvin will be found guilty of something because his actions were objectively reckless. As for the other cops, I saw in the news yesterday, one had only been on the force for 4 days. But even in 4 days, I think, me watching the video, and I had a biased perspective because I already knew the outcome, right? I already knew watching the video that George Floyd was going to die. But me watching the video, I had a visceral reaction inside my heart where I wanted to be there and push him off George's neck, and I wanted that death to not happen. And I've seen in the news the past few days that there's been some I don't know if legislation, but some rules are changing for some police departments where you can't use chokeholds anymore in Minneapolis. If you are an officer where somebody else is using excessive force, you have to report it at some point. And you also have an affirmative action or an affirmative requirement to make the cops stop using that force. And I've seen videos of cops doing that to each other in the past, which has always heartened me. I've been believe it or not, I've been the recipient of police abuse in the past. When I was a missionary in Oakland, California, I was in the Oakland mission, but I was in San Francisco. My companion and I were tracting. Actually, we had done splits, so I was off with a different missionary. I was with a missionary who was from Tonga, and we were tracting in a very affluent neighborhood. I don't know why we thought we'd get any results there, but one of the top 5 richest zip codes in the whole country, just south of San Francisco, and somebody called the police on us, and police came to where we were right by our car, and he asked what we were doing, and I started talking to him, and I was just trying to be my friendly self, and I said, "Hey, we're missionaries from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints," and he pulled his gun and pointed it right at me, and he said, "I need to know that you're on the up and up or telling the truth or whatever." He made me put my hands on the car. He made me open the trunk, which is totally illegal. I wasn't a lawyer back then, so I didn't know any better, but I showed him all our Book of Mormons in the trunk of the car instead of stolen goods or whatever. And he said, after he assaulted me and made me fear for my life, I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know if he was a corrupt cop, if he was going to shoot me and say that I tried to attack him. It was a secluded road, and then backup came all of a sudden. There were like 4 or 5 different cars there, and he said, "Oh, we had some break-ins here," and somebody called and said, strange people were walking around the neighborhood or whatever, and they said, "Just call us next time before you come tracked here." And I just said, "I don't think we're going to come back here for a while." So, but at the time, I just wanted to put it behind me, and but looking back, I probably should have done something about that, because that violated my civil rights, and it violated my companion for the day's rights as well, even though he's not a citizen. But I think there's a change happening with that sort of thing. I have a friend of mine in Utah who is an attorney. I'm sorry, getting a little off topic here, but he's an attorney that he files civil rights actions for African American men whose rights are violated by the police departments, even if it's a low amount, even if it's a $5,000 action against the police department. He says that he thinks that if he takes those actions and makes a big deal out of it, he can prevent an African American young man from getting shot by another police department because of the deterrent effect of taking action against that. So to come back around, I think it's important to charge officers in this sort of situation. I think it's also important to make changes. I've been calling for a long time for body cams to be required in every urban police department in the United States, and to have body cams that you can't turn off. During the riots in Louisville, they shot, they had a shootout and shot a black person there, and they didn't have their body cams on. And so the Louisville mayor fired the police chief. And I think that's the kind of action that we need to be taken. There needs to be, in a lot of different areas, really serious action. And there's been, prosecutors have been scared to charge police in the past because they have to work together every day, but that's not an excuse.
Right.
Amy Klobuchar didn't charge Chauvin in the past when he had shot someone, but now I think she's wishing that she had.
Exactly.
And so, sorry, that was a long answer to your question, but if you want me to clarify anything, please let me know.
Well, no, I want to piggyback off of, well, first, your experience on the secluded road. I say this, but I say it in all seriousness. Thank God you have white skin, because had you been a black person, and I know you had your companion who is Tongan who has dark skin, but had you yourself been black, things would have turned out, I can imagine, quite differently for you and your companion. And that's at the heart of the movement. That's at the heart of the protest. That's at the heart of the Black Lives Matter, because we are disproportionately impacted by racism. We are disproportionately impacted by inequities across the board, in housing, in food, in terms of access in urban areas to food, quality food, healthy food for families, in terms of real estate across the board. Black people are disproportionately impacted. And so it's at the crux of the conversation about finding the humanity, not finding it, seeing the humanity in Black lives. I have a slew of other questions that I want to ask, but we are not running out of time, but the countdown is on, and I want to make sure we get some questions in from the audience. The first question is, what do you say to those mimicking the death of George Floyd? So they're doing these knee challenges. I don't know if any of you have seen the memes that are circulating in social media, but it's disheartening, it's disgusting, it's offensive. Paul, I want to talk to you. I'm sure your son has probably seen some of these memes out in social media world. What is your take on that, and how are you having the conversation? What's the conversation about?
Well, it's horrifying. I'm aghast. I don't understand it. It's a manifestation of white privilege to reenact this horrific event in a way that makes light of a person's death. And it's difficult to express how horrifying that is. And yeah, my son has encountered it. He shared it with me. So in my estimation, it's a part of what we're talking about in terms of white privilege. And my frustration when I attempt to engage white people is automatically barriers go up. Walls go up when I even say those words. When I say systemic racism, walls go up. When I say white supremacy, walls go up. And I feel like we have to be able to engage white people in a way that elicits humility and understanding. And I think we have to be a part of the education process. And I know that there will just be people who automatically will put walls up. My effort is trying to bring those walls down. And I simply draw upon historical examples because I'm a historian and I try to use history as a way of helping us to stand in places of empathy instead of places of scorn and judgment and denial, in fact. And so I loved what you said earlier about this sense of humility and engaging in the moment that we're in. But just one example, 1790, the very first US Congress establishes requirements for becoming a naturalized citizen in the United States. The requirement was you had to be white and free. So I have no control over the fact that I am born white. Paulette, you have no control over the fact that you're born black. But automatically, being born white, I have access to citizenship in the United States of America. Automatically, because you're born black, you are denied the same access. If we can understand the way that the system is automatically stacked against black people, people of color. 1848, John C. Calhoun on the floor of the United States Senate said democracy is the government of a white race. His argument was that black people and people of color are genetically, biologically incapable of democracy. And when white people intermarry with black people, it's darkening the white race, making it unfit for democracy. So democracy was at stake in the mind of white people in terms of the unfolding of this systemic racism. And, I could march us through from that 1790 Congress all the way up to the present. That's what we mean when we say systemic racism. It's baked into the system, but walls automatically go up. And I feel like what we have to do is try to bring those walls down, stand in places of empathy, get white people to understand that, this doesn't it's not a zero-sum game. Like extending freedom and justice to Paulette doesn't mean that all of a sudden I have less freedom and justice for myself. There's no zero-sum game here. It means that it makes a more just and equitable society for all people if we engage in making sure that the least among us have equity and justice. That's the kind of society I want to live in. I want to live in a society that cares for the least among us because we're only as good as the least among us. So, I think we have to figure out a way to engage people so that the walls don't automatically go up. And I've been rereading Robin DiAngelo's book, White Fragility. And, I really recommend it. And I hope that white people are willing to engage because it helps to explain it in a really accessible way. It's short and hopefully can bring some of those walls down. If we're willing to stand in places of humility, it doesn't mean that I got everything handed to me. When I say white privilege, it doesn't mean that I didn't earn my degree. It doesn't mean that I didn't have to work hard. It doesn't mean any of that. But it means that baked into the system, simply because my skin is lighter than Paulette's skin, I had access to a lot of, society's functions that people who were born differently don't have the same access to.
Mm-hmm. And Paul, I totally, when I say this, I totally understand where you're coming from when you say this, but there are people watching who may not understand the perspective when you say the least of these. I want to make it very clear that there is no greater than or less than when we talk about the truth as it relates to Black people and white people being equal. So there's no less than or greater than. Equal in the sense of our creation, for sure. But in terms of our placement in America, there is no greater than or less than. So just want to make that clarification. Eve,
Yes. Thank you for that, Paulette, and I appreciate that. I don't want to leave a misperception there. I was drawing upon religious language, and my sort of sense is right. I'm talking about socioeconomic. The lowest rungs of the socioeconomic ladder. United States is only as good as where we're at with the lowest rung of the socioeconomic ladder, right? And my sense is we need to, make sure that everyone has equal access to economic and social and political power.
For certain. I want to move on. Eve, I'm going to pose this question to you and Chad. Crystal wants to know, what was it about this situation that makes it more motivating for white people to speak out? So what makes this tragedy so much more motivating than others?
I don't know that I can speak to that other than the straight up horror of seeing it in it. It's let me go personal for a moment. When I first saw the video, I was at work and it was on my phone, and I saw about a minute and a half of it, and I thought, oh, there's some ambiguity here, and I walked away. But I felt horrific. I knew that already just in the minute and a half, I could see there were things that I judged in how the officers were handling the situation. And I didn't know that he died on the scene at that time. I just knew that he ended up dying at the hospital. And my reaction was muted. And I mean, it was not any more than other horror that I've seen on Black Lives Matter posts in the past where I've seen horror, but it wasn't more. And then later that night, my mom mentioned it again, and I got myself to go watch the whole thing. After I watched the whole thing, I ran into my mother and apologized and said, I'm sorry, I had no idea when I was commenting earlier what this was. You've all said it. It's humanly sickening. People are interrupting and saying stop. Most humans that I know would have a gut response to that situation, no matter what. It isn't a shaky camera from another car where we can't see the face and the words. We can hear what they're saying and we can see what they're saying, and you feel like you're there, and it's horrific. It's graphic and horrific. I think that's just our mirror neurons can relate to everyone in that situation. That's why I think, but I'm totally not an expert. So that would be why I think there's more reaction. Personally, it galvanized the feeling of, I don't care if everyone thinks I'm over posting. I couldn't care less. I don't care if they're going to stop listening to me. I felt shrill, the way we would all feel in that moment, It
rocks you to your core, and it rocks you to your core so much so that it creates rage. Rage may not be your persona, but it creates a level of rage, and you question, how could someone do this to another human being?
Absolutely.
And so then all of that, because we are a social media society, and even with our friends that we communicate with face to face, it gives us a platform to express this rage, to express this anger. And what I petition my white audience who is watching this, put yourself in the place of those loved ones who are left behind because of the dehumanization of a Black body, but at the hands of police officers. Just put yourself in that place, because when you can fully encompass another person's sorrow, when you can fully encompass, if you have the desire to do so, someone else's rage, you'll understand, or it'll at least incite curiosity or a desire to understand a little better what I might be experiencing, what my perspective is on this whole issue of racism in America. Chad, really quickly, tell us, why is this so different? What makes this so different for white people as it relates to their response? Responses of advocacy. What makes this so different? Because other Black people have been murdered by police officers.
You know, this is all really just guesswork. I mean, it's just an opinion, and I'll go back to what I said earlier, because I've wondered it myself, because I've posted on so many others, and I think this one hit differently because there again, the twofold, the access, and you hit on it already, how we're all glued to social media and 24-hour news in our hand, number one. Number two, I think that in terms of white people reacting to it more so would be, there again, I'm going to fall back to the pandemic, and whether you've lost your job or whatever the actual case may be, I think it was just more accessible. I think it was more visible. I think it was more out in front than the other circumstances and issues. And I don't mean to marginalize Trayvon Martin or Philandro or any of the others, or Breonna Taylor for that matter, which I think is severely underreported. But in the case of George Floyd, I think it was just more out front than anything else, and it was more unavoidable. It was everywhere on Twitter. It was everywhere on Facebook. It was everywhere on Instagram. So when you've got the trifecta of those three, and I mean the new up and coming with adults, I mean it's been the big thing with kids already is TikTok. But I mean when you're on the big three, but then you're on TikTok as well, and there's millions of people seeing it, you're gonna have a reaction to it. And I think it was like what everybody else that's been in this struggle of awareness, you had to react. You had to have an opinion about it. You had to say something. Now, of course, then there's those others who want to throw in and negate their whole emotion by throwing the but, all this other stuff. But I think just to answer the question, it was just so much more accessible and prevalent and right there in our faces. So you couldn't deny it. You had to have a response to it.
That's a very interesting point. So my question then becomes, if it weren't for the pandemic and if it weren't for the video, we'd be protesting next year, next month, next week, whenever this happens again, because there were no eyes to see the tragedy, to see the disregard for this man's life. And that's a very, very unfortunate thought to consider, that if it weren't for this video and if it weren't for this pandemic that allows people to have this 24/7 access to their mobile device to watch the reloop and the articles and things of this video, we'd still be having this conversation tomorrow and the next day and the next day. And we likely will continue to have this conversation until true change is enacted across the board, not just in certain precincts, not just in certain neighborhoods, but across the board. Bret, we have a question from Robin. She wants to know, how do we go about changing how police are trained? Let's see, I can't read. I think this says foreign countries require 3 years of training. So the question is, how do we go about changing, I guess, the time frame in which police are trained in America as opposed to foreign countries requiring 3 years of training for their officers?
That's a good question. I do think that training is very important, and that's another point that Rudy Giuliani made about this case. He said that what he saw, and he was a U.S. attorney for New York City for a long time, and then he was the mayor. But he said what he saw in the George Floyd case was officers who had very bad training, and he said that if it had been New York City, that there would have been lieutenants there, that there would have been higher authority officers there that wouldn't have allowed that technique to be used on George Floyd. So I do think training is a very important factor and part of this. I don't know all the ins and outs of how police are trained and how long their boot camp or whatever is, but I do think that I've been like I said earlier. I think there should be national standards because every state and every county and every city, even within cities, there's sometimes different police agencies. But when one agency messes up like this, and when there's, and take it even a step further, if Chauvin did have intent, and all the evidence will come out as to what his state of mind was, what his intent was. Keith Ellison, and I forgot to say earlier, he was the Attorney General of Minnesota, said they have to be careful how high they charge this murder because there's going to be very intelligent defense attorneys trying to fight the charges on the other side. But when an agency messes up like this, it affects the whole country. I mean, as Paul was saying, when Black lives are diminished, all of our lives are diminished. And so there should be a national standard, I believe, as far as police tactics, techniques, training, that sort of thing. Like I said earlier, that they have to have body cams. And I applaud ending chokeholds. That was the same thing in the Alton Sterling case. That should have never happened. It should have never happened over selling fake cigarettes. And I think that it's something, we're having a national conversation on this. There are influences that control most of the money in this country and control most of the media in this country that want the middle class to fight against themselves. They want it to make it a black middle class versus white middle class thing. They want to get white people mad about Black Lives Matter, about systemic racism. They want black people to get mad at the white person across the street instead of being mad at the oligarchs who don't want things to change, that they're the super billionaires that love the power and money that they have. They don't want the system to be fair for everybody. That's something I think that we all need to understand, is that if we unite together, we can overcome anything. We can overcome anything with Jesus's help. Any righteous cause, uniting together, good people in this country can overcome it. But if we let Satan divide us, we're not going to overcome. We're going to just fight amongst ourselves, and that's what the evil people want to have happen. So I think police training is very important, but even more important, we need to have empathy for each other. We need to trust each other. We need to have love for each other. We need to open our hearts to our brothers and sisters that don't live in our same neighborhoods and don't look the same as us. There's a lot of ways for us to work together on this, on legislation. But we really need to listen to our hearts, because in our hearts we know that each other just wants to live and wants harmony and wants to have love and happy families and be safe and work together and live together as all of God's children.
Very, very important point. Of course, everyone watching doesn't share the Christian tenets of belief. However, I think we can all agree that it's important, it's necessary, it's critical that we all have access to those things that are good and edifying. We should all be able to have access to those things, regardless of what makes us different, whether it be our race, whether it be our religion, whatever the case may be. So I appreciate you bringing that up, Bret. We have one more question that I'm going to pose to each of the guests, and we'll start with you, Alexa. How do we get people to listen? How do we get people to listen? And I want you to, how do we get young people? Paul was saying that his sons, his young people are having a challenge with those in their circle who don't agree that it's important to recognize and speak openly about Black Lives Matter. How do we get those people to listen?
That is tough, of course, but I've found, just in general in my life, I try to let love be what guides. I'm not, most of my choices. I try. That's my goal. And so I think in this, like Chad was saying, instead of, kind of going for combative, if you approach even people who disagree with you with love and, try to give them examples or analogies just to help them understand, there's the burning fire analogy that we've all heard, the house down the street's on fire. We're not going to get mad that the fire department isn't spraying all of the houses. That's silly. And I think it just comes down to meeting people where they're at, seeing, we all have a past that lead us to where we are and the beliefs that we have, and seeing that and saying, well, here's where I am. And I think just, seeking to realize that the truth, that's all it is to me, is truth. It's just what's right, and going about it the right way to just try to garner compassion and saying, yeah, they're rioting and looting and that sucks, but they're, when a child throws a tantrum, if we love the child, we realize it might be a sign of, it could be sexual abuse, or, a trauma is happening, and we address the trauma to improve the behavior of a child. So imagine, even 400 years of this, a system that started with the first Congress automatically putting an entire race of God's children behind. That's a lot of trauma. And I feel mad too. That's crazy. And I don't know. It's all insane to me that anybody is not on the side of seeking justice. And so it's hard to sympathize with that side for me. I just have a hard time feeling okay with that, but I do try and recognize that people are a product of their environment and their upbringing, and try to let them see that they can be the turning point. They can be the change of generations to come, that they can, have children that are better than they were. As, my friends are my age, are starting to have families, and we can be the link that changes how we view the world. And it, has to come from love. I think that's what it comes down to.
I appreciate your analogy of a child throwing a temper tantrum. That temper tantrum could be coming from any type of traumatic experience that child has had. And for clarification purposes, when we talk about rioting, when we talk about looting, when we talk about protesting, Martin Luther King, and we had this conversation yesterday, said that rioting is the language of the unheard. So for 401 years in America, Black people have always been subservient. We have always gotten the short end of the stick. So just imagine, 400, I hate standing in line for 25 minutes, now that the coronavirus is here and you have to, social distance while you're, at least for me, some of the stores I go to, you have to stand outside and 6 feet apart, and that takes time. That's frustrating. So imagine having to stand in line and having to be turned around for 401 years to endure that. And then when something like this happens, and when Trayvon Martin happens, when Sandra Bland happens, just imagine the frustration, the anger. And so that's the expression of the unheard, because we're not being heard. Our concerns, our outcries are not being heard. So many times that's the result. No, we don't condone killing people for expressing their views. No, we don't condone that. No, we don't condone people burglarizing businesses. No, we don't condone that. But sometimes, for change, for ears to be open, sometimes that has to happen. And that's all I know to say. Until we're able to have the dialogue, until we're able to talk about it among our circle of influence. It's great that we're having this online virtual chat, but we've got to take that conversation back and continue to have it in our circles of influence. I see, like I said, Paul and Alexa and Bret and Eve and Chad are doing these things. And we have to continue to do these things. When our friends, your friends, say something that is not true or says something that makes you cringe, you got to call them on it, because it's these little steps we take to eradicate racism that will truly eradicate racism and create a society that is just not just for you, but just for Black people. And so I petition, if you're watching this, if you're having a challenge with the looting and the rioting, and you want to compare or justify the murder of an innocent Black man, an unarmed Black man, consider humanity, consider human life. I petition that of you, because until that happens, and it comes from a place of sincere desire to change, nothing will change. I want to thank my guests, and I know I said I was going to ask that question of everyone, but I'm grateful for the contribution that you've made to tonight's discussion. We do have a few more people asking questions, so if you can, please, after we sign off, go through the feed and see what might you be able to answer that we didn't get a chance to get to on air. So thank you so much, Bret. Thank you for bringing that law perspective. Alexa, thank you for bringing your perspective as a young adult. And Paul, thank you so much for talking to us about the historical context about this whole issue. Chad, I appreciate you. Eve, thank you for taking courage to come on and, putting all white fright aside to talk about your truth as it relates to the humanity of Black people. I appreciate you. Thank you so much. And thank you for watching. Tomorrow, come back, same time, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, for the final installment of Decriminalizing Black Bodies, where we talk to moms. I don't know if you've seen the meme, but, well, it's not a meme, it's a picture of a woman holding up a sign, a protester